Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to another Critique of the Week. It is Friday, July 2nd. Hope you're having a good Independence Day weekend. And as always, the Critique of the Week, the point is to give that workshop experience to at least one poet every week, sometimes two, usually two poems, to give that experience you get from workshop, where you get to hear what people think as they read your poem, how a stranger responds, what's working, what isn't, that kind of thing. So please do, as you go ahead, leave any comments you have in the chat windows on YouTube and Facebook, and then the poet, in this case Karen Sun, will be able to see them later. I'll read out as many as I can. So hello to James Cicillo over on Facebook. Who do we have over here? Terry R. and D. Coleman over on YouTube are the first ones in. Good to see you. Let's dive into this poem. We have two here, and they're both sort of average one-page length. Here's today's poem. The first of two, Defining Poverty. What does poverty mean? Is it the green scrap of piece of paper, crispy, sharp, permanently clinging to Midas hands? Soggy, despondent, permanently disintegrating against my sandpapery skin. Preoccupation with its flits abound. I too attempt to give chase, but it slips effortlessly, ethereally out of reach. Its overvalued pyrite tucked away in the high-profile safe. Its undervalued toilet paper strewn carelessly, unraveling about in one's public privy. Cackling at my loss, sneering at my history, demeaning my genealogy, snubbing my lack of opportunity. May I explain again what is poverty? Arms hung, hair bands that have long lost their elasticity, no vitality. Lifeless corpse hung limply, obsessive, invisible nooses, though not nearly invisible enough. They swing subconsciously, swinging, but the child expectantly, laughing exuberantly, swinging unethereally reaching, nowhere to be found. Because this is a game of hide and seek, the dream where she hides. Yet you still seek to deny. So allow me to demand once more, please define poverty. That was the first of two poems. It was Karen Sun with Defining Poverty. And I should have said Karen Sun, if you want to find her on Twitter, it's Karen's Poetry. So at CARENS_poetry if you want to find Karen on Twitter. No general questions today, so let's just dive in, look at the poem line by line. So first off, you have to note when you look at the submission, if it were a submission, this lowercase d, and sort of wonder why. Defining poverty sort of sets up the poem. So here we go. What does poverty mean? And we have the capital P of poverty again, and the under lowercase what. So when I see something like that, I think hopefully there's a reason for it. And I'm not really sure what's gained actually by the capitalization here. The only word in the whole poem that's capitalized, even Midas hands, I think are supposed. Midas is a name, so that's usually capitalized. So the only word besides that's capitalized is poverty. So that's something that stands out, and that can work or not. But it's the first thing I would notice. And now, what does poverty mean? Is the first line. So first of all, the first line, that would be a better title than the title. It almost, repeats the title over again, but adds a little bit more. So why not just make that the title and start there? Is it that green scrap piece of paper, crispy, sharp, permanently clinging to Midas hands? So I'm wondering, what it means to be clinging to Midas hands. The Midas, everything Midas touched turned to gold. So if it's scrap pieces of paper, money clinging to Midas hands, the money is turned to gold. I'm not sure if I can piece that, put that together. But we get descriptions here: soggy, despondent, permanently disintegrating against my papery skin. So what I was wondering is if the Midas hands are really some kind of like reverse Midas hands or something. There's sort of an opportunity here. And this is one of those things as you write, this is one of those poems you can feel like the intention of writing exploring poverty and a reaction to somebody who's talking about it, right? But things come up when you're writing that you don't expect, and you got to keep an eye out for that. Sort of little avenues that you can take, little side detours that might open up the whole poem into meaning. And this idea of Midas hands, but everything disintegrating instead of turning to gold, like the opposite of Midas. So it'd be like the anti-Midas or something. That seems like a great opportunity for a poem. And that's just like it sort of popped out of the subconscious here in this poem, it seems like. And that's something that could really work, I think, if it were to become an extended metaphor. Like imagine a poem listing all the things that happen to the anti-Midas who's describing poverty, and everything that's touched turns soggy and disintegrates, And as a metaphor for poverty, I think that works really, really well. So look, always keep an eye out for these kind of opportunities. And right now we sort of just slip past it, but this is something that could really expand up and make it for a really interesting poem. So my main suggestion the first time reading through this was to expand on that and make that the whole poem almost. This idea of Midas, but working in reverse with the sandpapery skin and everything falling apart. Because it's a really cool metaphor. Preoccupation with it flits abound. Flits abound? Should that be around? I'm not sure. Flits abound? I attempt to give chase, but it slips. But it slips. So poverty slips? Is the it poverty? Poverty slips effortlessly, ethereally out of reach. Or are we talking about the opposite of poverty, like the money, the piece of paper that slips out of reach? So I'm not sure what it is. I'm a little lost at that spot. But I assumed reading it that poverty was what was slipping out of reach. So, but it slips effortlessly, ethereally out of reach. It's overvalued pyrite tucked away in a high-profile safe. So I'm still like, what is? Are we talking about poverty, or are we talking about, the gold metaphorically that Midas would be making? I think it doesn't make sense though that poverty slips out of reach, and poverty is overvalued. So this is ambiguous in a way that's making it difficult to follow the poem here. It's overvalued pyrite tucked away in a high-profile safe. It's undervalued toilet paper strewn carelessly unraveling about in one's public privy. So I can't decide what the it's is. Maybe. So Sandra Fee says, I think it's money. Yeah, I think you have to read it like it's money, but since the whole poem is defining poverty, and we keep coming back to this, what is poverty? I don't know. It's hard to figure out what the it's is. So we have to use use a noun in here so that we know what we're talking about at this spot, and then we can know how to suss out these two. It makes more sense if money is what's tucked away in a high-profile safe. Like it's meaningless unless you use it, But it's undervalued toilet paper strewn carelessly, unraveling about one's public privy. Anyway, cackling at my loss, sneering at my history, demeaning my genealogy, snubbing my lack of opportunity. There's a nice little riff, the nice rhythm in the repetition there. Might ask again, what is poverty? Arms hung, hair bands that have lost their elasticity. That's a great metaphor there. I like that. No vitality, lifeless corks hung limply. So, obsessive invisible nooses, though not nearly invisible enough. So we get a lot of metaphors here, and I think they mostly work. They go by really quick though, and could be expanded on maybe. But in this section, see, we're talking about poverty again, and now I'm thinking that it is poverty because it sort of goes back to that, right? Because hairbands have lost their. That seems more like poverty, doesn't it? With no vitality. It feels like we're describing poverty here again, which then makes me wonder if the it's was poverty here too. Anyway, they swing subconsciously, swinging, but that child, expectantly laughing, exuberantly swinging, unethereally reaching. So this area right here is a mouthful. A lot of syllables. And it doesn't have the same smoothness of speech as the rest of the poem. Let's see. So Mark A. Grenier over here says scrap and piece are redundant. It is too dependent on adverbial modifiers. Should its in the first line and its of the stanza be its with an apostrophe? And ethereally, is that a real word? Let's see, is it green? Where was he? The it's in the first line of the stanza. Which stanza? First line. Which stanza are we on? I'm lost. But anyway, so this I like the idea of it. The child's laughter being out of reach is a really cool thing to describe. It's just clunky in the way that it's all the adverbs. All the adverbs sort of like pile onto each other and make it difficult to follow and sort of clunky. So if this could be described, like describe the child a little more in detail, like put a child someplace and describe it a little bit. And we know where to be found, because this is a game of hide and seek. I like that too. That poverty is a game of hide and seek is another opportunity. Like we were talking about, this Midas hands as an opportunity. This game of hide and seek and the swings and the laughing, this whole thing, which you can see, I think, you can watch sort of the subconscious at work, ironically, because the word subconscious is here. But they swing subconsciously. And just because the phrase swing popped out, it feels like the subconscious kicked out this idea of swing and swinging. And then we get the children who would swing. And then we get the children's game of hide and seek. So it's a really cool way to see how the brain works as we go through this poem. But this hide and seek and the children as a metaphor for poverty too is another one of these things that you could expand on and make it its own poem. It's another one of those opportunities to take, a side detour. And really when you write, that's what you should be looking for, because those sort of spontaneous insights are what make art and what make poetry really work. And so when you get these opportunities, I think it's worth taking them and seeing where they lead. And so I could see a whole poem expanding out of here too, out of the children laughing and swinging, and what that means. What the playground is like, what the environment is like, the park or the housing complex that they're living in, or whatever we're talking about here. You expand on that and use that as a metaphor through which to talk about the poverty that's the main point of the poem. So I think that's a really good opportunity. There's two really great things that popped out, I think. The anti-Midas concept, which is cool, and the hide and seek here. The dream where shides, yet you still seek to deny. So allow me to demand once more, please define poverty. And make it the you here. And the you is sort of implied a few times up at the beginning of the poem. And so it'd be nice to know who the you is as well. Is there somebody specific that's being addressed? Are you talking to me as the reader of the poem? A lot of times you'll see a poet take advantage of this and say, what does poverty mean, dear reader, or something like that. And that pulls it in and makes it feel a little more intimate, so that you know who is being spoken to when you get to the you down here. You still seek to deny. So who denies? It feels like this is written specifically to someone who was talking about poverty. Because who would deny it? I mean, do you think that the reader is still denying it? I don't think so. It feels like there's some specific instance that this is a response to. And so it'd be nice to know that, so we can put some context into the poem and get more of the feeling out of it. So allow me to define once more, please define poverty, or demand once more, please define poverty. So we don't really get the whole story either. We sort of dance around what inspired the poem. Let me see let's see. So Mark Grenier, he was talking about the it in the first line of stanza 2. Stanza 2, preoccupation with it flits abound. Yeah, that's the place where it's not here. It's actually here. Good, thanks for pointing that out, Mark. This is the it that makes the rest of the stanza be ambiguous. You can't really tell, because it could be referring back to this, or it could be referring back to the poverty. We don't really know which. So Yeah, so make it clear there, and then we can understand what you're getting at here in this rest of the stanza. Sandra Fee says, I'm really struggling with that reference of corpses and nooses. Sharon Frenty says, a child laughs in a park where nothing else is found. Interesting suggestion there. So Margaret Grenier says, this poem does not really seem like it's in control of the language. There's inspiration here, but it lacks control and needs more editing, I think. James Cicilla says, introducing nooses brings a racial dimension in, right? Possibly. I didn't read it that way. Where, let me read the noose lines again. Where were they? Oh, yeah. Invisible nooses not nearly invisible enough. The corpse is hung. Well, I don't know. There's nothing else in the poem that really reads racially that I noticed. I didn't read that part that way. If so, it's another thing to be expanded on. Let's see. Let me look over at YouTube and see if there are any suggestions over here. Sally Dunn says, the poem seems to really start at the second what is poverty, which is here. And yeah, that's where the poem gets kind of concrete a little bit, right? We get the arms hung, hairbands have lost their elasticity, no vitality. We get the lifeless corpse hung limply, obsessive invisible nooses, though not nearly invisible enough. The swing subconsciously, swinging. So, I don't know. I mean, that comparison of children swinging to swinging from a noose is a really striking image there. Let's see. So Terry R. says, I do like the hairbands, especially since elasticity is an economic concept. That's a good point. Thanks for sharing that, Terry. Let's see. I take the capitalization of poverty and no other word, even the proper name Midas, is meant to put the emphasis squarely there. Yeah, it is, but it feels a little sort of gimmicky or something. I don't know. I don't think it's really necessary to do that unless I don't think it's serving enough function for how much it stands out. So I would probably not do that, and I would probably leave poverty lowercase if it's going to be a poem where everything is lowercase, or if it were in regular capitalization rules. Let's see. I'm not sure I have anything else to add here. Sharon Frenty says, maybe this piece just goes too many places. I feel like the piece came from really inspired, like someone was pushed to write this poem. And then stuff came out in a lot of different directions that it could have gone, but it hasn't found itself yet. So my real suggestion with this piece would be to take the separate poems that you have here and write each of them as their own poems. And really focus on concrete details, which we always talk about, but emotion lives in concrete details, because what we're doing in the poem is we're entering into the landscape of someone else's imagination, and the concrete details are what help us do that. So I would take this idea of the anti-Midas hands, where everything you touch is disintegrating, and that being poverty. I would take that and make that its own poem, and then I would take this idea of the nooses and swinging and the children swinging and the hide and seek, and how that plays into poverty. I'd make that its own poem too, and just play with both and see where those ideas take you, because it feels like those are what are pushing out of the depths of the subconscious, and that's what you really have to listen for as you're creating anything. Is it, how your subconscious is speaking to yourself, and I think those come out in those two places. So I would make these two separate poems and just play with that in that direction. Let's see. Okay, let's move on to the next poem. It's been 20 minutes. And the next is here. When we are old. When we are... What? Hang on one second. Sitting on my foot. Okay. When we are old. When we are both old, sorry. When we are both old... and your wild, dark hair is no longer so bold, I will still be dazzled by your devilish smile, the same one that warmed a heart so cold as all so cold all those decades ago. When we both grow old, after a life rebelling against the status quo, let's aspire for tranquil contentment together, just the two of us in our cozy abode. When we both become old, so canes become necessities for our fond evening strolls, I wonder if you'll grumble at them for your slow, agonizing pace. Oh, what an amusing sight that is to behold. When we both feel old, too tired for anything except each other's hands we continue to hold, I am certain your mischievous streak will further deepen. You'll attempt to inflate my ire as you deliberately continue to troll. When we both look old, but you still keep healing my wounds, despite me now being whole. I look forward to resting my head on your shoulder as you remain committed to dedicating to me my treasured romantic odes. When we both cannot be a day more old, we will lie in bed reminiscing about our long, long road and solemnly speaking our premature I-dos, vows etched permanently into our souls. As we both drift asleep, I hear from a distance I love you. I whip around only to meet a stranger with wild dark hair so bold and devilish smile dazzling my dark world, warming a heart so cold as if we have loved before all those decades ago. This is really interesting. I love the sort of the structure of the poem, and this the repetition and the rhyme work really well in places. I love the old and abode. There's some really nice off rhyme or near rhymes there, and in the what an amusing sight to behold. It's not completely regular because sometimes, well, I guess the troll and old, it's a really loose metaphor scheme going on here. And I think that works really well in a lot of places. But then sometimes that clunkiness that we saw in that one line with all the adverbs comes back here too. But maybe let's look at this poem line by line as well. When we are both old, and your hair and your wild dark hair no longer so bold. That's a little too many adjectives there. Like wild dark hair, no longer so bold. A little, I think, just wild or dark maybe. I will still be dazzled by your devilish smile, which is kind of a bit of a cliche, devilish smile. The same one that warmed a heart so cold all those decades ago. We get that cold and go, nice sound there. And, in warmed heart, I mean, these are a little bit cliche, but not in a way that ruins the poem. Cliche. We are both grow old after a life rebelling against the status quo. Let's aspire for tranquil contentment together, just the two of us in our cozy abode. I love that, just the two of us in our cozy abode. The sounds of that is perfect. That's a really good line. And I feel like this is the optimal length, sort of, for the lines in the poem. Like, this stanza feels like the right length to me. You can just kind of feel it, can't you? And when they get longer, they feel like they're sort of cramming too much in. So I think maybe cutting them down to this length, the longer ones, would be really beneficial. When we both become old, so canes become necessities for our fond evening strolls. I like that too, the fond evening strolls. There's a nice, the sounds there. When the sounds are working, in the lines that it works really well. I wonder if you'll grumble at them for your slow, agonizing pace. So agonizing is just too many syllables, and there's no reason. Slow pace is fine. Oh, what an amusing sight to behold. And I like that too. Oh, what an amusing sight to behold. Maybe not the O, a little too long there, but that's a sort of the rhyme comes back. You almost forget about the rhyme, and then it comes back there. That feels nice too. When we both feel old, too tired for anything except each other's hands, we continue to hold. See, that's like this line. It needs to be rewritten in a way that feels like it's the right length. This is too long. Too tired for anything except each other's hands, we continue to hold. How could you rephrase that? Too tired for anything but our own hands we continue to hold? Maybe. I mean, something like that, but just each other's hands, and each other and the continue are just a lot of syllables to cram in there, and it feels like you expect the line to end and then it doesn't. I am certain your mischievous streak will further deepen. Kind of clunky a little bit there. So this stanza has some more problems than the other ones had. You'll attempt to inflate my ire. So attempt to inflate my ire is such a, again, a clunky phrase. The conjugation of that just makes it really long and stretched out in sort of a, like in a clunky way. As you deliberately too long continue, deliberately continue. So there's these big phrases here that just feel out of the rhythm of the rest of the poem. So if you could rewrite this stanza at the same length as this stanza, I think it would work really, really well too. When we both look old, again, I like these repetitions and the little changes too in these first lines. But you still keep healing my wounds despite me now being whole. I look forward to resting my head on your shoulder as you remain committed to dedicating. Why not just as you remain dedicated to me, my treasured romantic odes? When we both cannot be a day more old, we will lie in bed reminiscing about our long, long road and solemnly speak our premature I do's, vows etched permanently into our souls. So again, once you get back to this length, it feels better again. So this is a poem that really wants to be more rhythmic and repetitive. I don't think T.R. Powelson is here, but if she was, she would say to write this poem in a different format, into like maybe a villanelle or a pantoum or something where there was repetition, and you could sort of play off the regularness of the lines and lengths. And I think that's something I'd highly recommend. So unfortunately, TR's not here. I wonder which form she would say. Which form she would say that we should do this in, but I'm sure she would. Okay. As we both drift to sleep, I hear from a distance I love you. I whip around only to meet a stranger with wild dark hair so bold and a devilish smile dazzling my dark world, warming a heart so cold, as if we have loved before all those decades ago. And I really like this ending. This line especially, this feels like the heart of the poem too. As we both drift asleep, I hear from a distance I love you. The simplicity of the language there works really well. And since we are having this, when we both cannot be a day more old, or we both look old, these repetitions, having the stanza start out with something different feels sort of like refreshing and surprising in a weird way, even though it's a really simple sentence. So I think this is really good too. So I really like this last stanza. I whip around only to meet a stranger with wild dark hair so bold. Against the wild dark hair is a little too much. To me, I think it's one too many adjectives. And devilish smile, which works really good. So I really like the ending. Let's see. Okay, let me look at some more comments here, because these are my suggestions. I think this poem completely differently from the last poem. Actually, it's funny because it's a lot of times that when we do these critiques, the poems are very similar in like what they're missing or what's not working and what is. These poems are almost opposite, because this feels like it needs to be reined in. The defining poverty has all these directions it could have gone, and it needs to sort of find its focus and be reined in. This one is the opposite. It's sort of perfect, really nicely arced, and it sort of fits together in a form, like the style of writing is decided already. So it sort of knows what it's doing, whereas the other poem doesn't really know what it's doing. So I just feel like this needs to be tightened in and made shorter and in some kind of form that really fits what you're doing instead of as loosely as it is. Like if I don't know if you write in meter ever or try to, but a really good exercise and a way to improve this poem, I think, would be to make it some kind of like iambic pentameter or some kind of at least regular line length meter, and then it would force you to cut the stuff you don't need and make the poem feel like it was tight and really intentional, even while it has this nice arc that I like too. So, okay, let's see. So James DeSilla says troll is an internet term that doesn't seem to fit the other language of the poem. Where was troll? I always have trouble finding. Here's troll. You'll attempt to inflate my ire as you deliberately continue to troll. This is kind of slangy. Yeah, I agree. In that usage, it's slang in a way that's not used in the rest of the poem, so it does stand out a little bit. I mean, it takes the poem from a timeless poem to a the temporal poem, or fixed to the current moment where trolls on the internet are a thing. And otherwise, it's pretty timeless. So it does stand out a little bit. Let's see. Mark Grenier says, sometimes the writer seems to be reaching for poetic phrasings when straightforward plain English would be better. Is a great point. This stretches lines and creates clunky combos. Yeah, that's a great point. And the best lines in many poems very often are just the most simple. When there's like an honesty and emotion being expressed in a really simple, straightforward language in a place that we have the context for and know how to relate to it, that's some of the most powerful, best lines in poetry. And, reaching for things that sound interesting is usually not the right way to go. Aaron Cloyd says, in the last stanza, if they are almost asleep, would the speaker be able to whip around? That's an interesting detail. So, as we both drift off to sleep, I hear in the distance, I love you. I whip around. Yeah, that's a good point. That doesn't really fit with the, if you were drifting off to sleep, the way you turn wouldn't necessarily be to whip around. I don't know if that's a good description of it. Good point, Aaron. Mary Ellen Carr says, need the hair reference. Sorry. Need the hair reference to start and end to show it's the same person. Whatever words used at the start should be echoed, even if your suggestion for changing is followed. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you do need to know that it's the same person throughout. And so the wild dark hair, maybe just wild hair would be better. You don't need the dark. And then you just repeat the wild hair here. You do need to know that it's the same person, though, for sure. Okay, let's look over on YouTube. Now, Vicky Mika says, wow, I love the last stanza all by itself. Is Vicky? Yeah, it must be this one. Yeah, it's a little poem all its own. And you could even make this sort of, I mean, I like the repetition in the way that the rhymes move through the poem. I like the format. And so I wouldn't want to lose the we feel. I wouldn't want to actually do this, but you could make this last stanza its own poem and just call it something. Call it When We Were Both Old. And then, describe the as we both drift off to sleep, I hear this. That could be its own poem. Let's see. Okay, I think that might be all we have for today, unless I have any other comments here to share. Nicole Smith says, not sure who still has dark hair when they are old. Silver? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, how old is relative, right? I know I feel old, and people older than me don't think I'm old, so. Let's see. And then, Mark A. Grenier also says, why are the I do's premature? Yeah, that's a good question, too. Yeah, there are little details here, like the whip around, that I didn't catch, but you guys are. So why is the I do's premature? I mean, because you end up growing old together by the end, right? And those are vows etched permanently. So why is that premature? It's a good question. Let's see. Okay, well, I think that is our critique of the week for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. As always, nice to take a little break on my Friday before the day is done to share a couple poems and hopefully help improve them a little bit. Thanks to Karen Sun for sharing those too. And let's see. So before we go, let me let you know who is the guest on the Rattlecast coming up. Let's see, next week's guest. Oh, it's going to be Allison Luderman. That's right. And do make note that the show is going to be Tuesday, July 6th instead of Sunday. We're moving it back to Tuesday just for this week because the 4th of July, Independence Day here in the States, is this Sunday, and I figured everybody would be out, doing their fireworks or grilling or whatever they do on Independence Day, so I didn't want to disrupt that with a Rattlecast. So we moved it to Tuesday, July 6th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and the prompt for this week was... Sorry, I'm pulling it up. Could not remember. Oh, I didn't even update it here. Shoot. Does anybody remember what the prompt for this week was? I still have the fairy tale or folk tale. Let me look over here. Bear with me. I want to remind myself what the prompt is. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Write a poem in which the speaker is aboard a moving train. So that was your prompt for the Rattlecast. Write a poem in which the speaker is aboard a moving train. So we'll do that for the open lines as well as any other poems you'd like to share. We'll talk to Allison Luderman, a poet we've published a whole bunch of times. Just a wonderful and prolific poet out of the Bay Area. Her newest book is In the Time of Great Fires. She has several other books too. She has a really nice monthly newsletter where she includes poems and things if you want to sign up at her website. I've been getting those for a long time. So I'm looking forward to talking to Allison. That is Rattlecast number 100. A great anniversary kind of episode after more than 2 years. So hope to see you then, Tuesday, July 6th, 8 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, hope you have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.